A very wonderful good evening, ladies and gentlemen, fellow storytellers from across the continent of Africa and beyond in Europe, in the Caribbean. Welcome to our Think Stories Hangout. It's been quite a while. We've been receiving your emails, we've been receiving your text messages. What's going on? Think Stories, we've not heard from you for a while. But essentially, we went under the radar a little to reset. And today we are bouncing back with a bang, an experience that you will certainly relive for a very long time to come. As we know, stories are the only communication forms that connect to every part of our body, and they stay with us as long as the cord of memory linger on. So we're going to have a very fantastic evening this time around. And in a nutshell, very soon I'll be introducing the special guest that I'm going to have tonight, and we will even go deeper into what we are coming to do. Now, for those of you who are joining us for the very first time, Think Stories is a storytelling platform that we created. Actually, I built in sometime in 2021 to bring African communicators together to, use the power of storytelling to drive the brand narrative of organizations, but even more importantly, to tell the world what is right with Africa. Everybody knows what's wrong with Africa, but we've got to tell them what is right with Africa. So stories are the best ways of doing this. And over the period, we've had some of the most fantastic sessions. We had a session with a gentleman called David Lennon. David is based in New York, and he works for a production company called Fortune. He actually worked on a series called Cookinomics, showed on Netflix, where they followed and tracked the activities of Pablo Escobar and produced a series on it, which was a big hit in Netflix back in the day. And then we met with a man called, he's known as the father of transmedia storytelling. He's called Professor Henry Jenkins. And for me, it was one of the most enlightening sessions we've ever had. And that was another great session we had. Then we met with Ricardo Adami on sustainability storytelling. So Ricardo actually is a C-suite corporate executive. He used to be the global head of communication for Microsoft, really worked with Bill Gates and co for a very long time. Then he joined one of the leading mining companies in the world, where he was the global CEO. So we've done quite a lot. And every now and then, we also do have Hangout. Hangouts are different from the ones I've mentioned, because with those ones, we have plenary sessions, we have breakout rooms, we go, we share, we discuss, we come and present. But this one is a discussion. This one is about perspectives. This one is about expert knowledge. So every one of us here is going to get an opportunity to share, but this conversation is going to be led by three of the finest storytellers that I have personally encountered. So in a bit, I'll be introducing them. It's about storytelling and it's about perspectives. And we just want to look at quite a couple of trends and a few of the things that are happening in our space, especially with how the world is going. So we're going to have a look at even AI at all. This whole AI beast people keep talking about. Does it have any role to play in storytelling? Because stories are about emotions. So machines, are they going to take over what we are doing? For creative writers, what are some of the very valuable techniques and skills that you should know? And guess what? We're going to have an experience with poetry as well. We're going to have some poetry recitals right here in this house. And the person doing that says she wants to invoke the spirit of the ancestors. So that's an interesting time that we are going to have. So this is how we are going to go about it. I'm going to introduce our speakers. After I introduce our speakers, we delve straight into, we just take some opening remarks from them and, ask them a few questions, Q&As to start with. Then you will have the opportunity to join us as well with when we open up for the opening forum and all that. So that is how it's going to go. Let me just start off by introducing my guest, and I'm sure that you saw them on social media today. The first person is Felene Cayetano. Now, Felene is from Belize. And so, Nasiba, if you can spotlight Felene on the screen for everybody to see her better. She's from Belize in the Caribbean, and she's a Garifuna, Liberian. She's a mother, she's a visual and literary storyteller. Now, since 2007, she's worked as a librarian within the Belize National Library Service and Information System. So you know why she is fond of her stories. She's published 3 poetry collections, Evolution, Crossing Bridges, Urua, and an anthology of short fiction by Belizean authors, Belizean Nail Soap. Her poems and short stories have also been published in Caribbean, Latin American, and North American literary anthologies and journals. Felene's nature and portrait photography has been exhibited in Belize and online as NFTs. Between 2019 and 2021, she wrote and directed the short film Afeyeni, which means faith. Hopefully, I mentioned the word well. Sites. Her first completed short film premiered in Guatemala in March 2022. So Felene is a very loaded person, and she's somebody I can call a friend. I've known her personally. A very lovely mother of 2 wonderful boys. And Felene, it's lovely to have you. Can you hear your first hello to us?
Greetings, greetings from Belmopan, Belize.
All right, pleasure to have you. Now, my next person, she is from, guess where, Ghana. Nana Nyarko Boateng is the founder of Get Center, a specialist communications firm. Now, she's currently pursuing a PhD in English creative writing at Texas Tech University and holds an MFA in creative writing from the University of Virginia, where she was awarded the prestigious Hempfield Prize for Fiction in 2022. I did visit Nana in Virginia University in 2022, just last year. As a writer and editor, Nana works in both creative and developmental environments to produce diverse storytelling projects. She's taught creative writing and rhetoric at the University of Virginia and now teaches at Texas Tech University. Her work has appeared in anthologies such as Relations, Lusaka Punk, Summoning the Rain Reflections, According to Sources, and Look Where You Have Gone to Sit. Nana Nyarko Boateng, it's my distinguished honor to welcome you to ThinkStories. Can we hear your hello, Nana?
Hello, Sammy. Hello, everybody. I've already seen a few friends, so I'm very excited.
Pleasure to have you. Now, our third person, she's called Porsche Mysticque Steel. She is an African-American, but she's based in Nigeria. She's actually an African now. Porsche had a last-minute emergency and will be joining us a bit on while the program goes on, but I'll introduce her nonetheless. She's actually an award-winning book coach. She's a TEDx speaker. She's an author and the CEO of Mysticque Publishing Services. So if you have a CEO who wants to author a book, she's a coach for you. And she's one of the youngest Black female self-publishing experts who helps high-performing CEOs combine their story and wisdom to publish highly impactful books that generate income, influence, and expand their thought leadership. She's been featured in multiple publications, including Business Insider, New York Weekly, US Reporter, and more. So you agree with me that tonight we are in for some of the world's best who are our own. So we will now get into it, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you. Also to welcome all of you who have joined. I know some are still trying to get on with the technical hitches that we have, but I do have friends from the Chartered Institute of Public Relations UK who have joined in, friends from Cote d'Ivoire, friends from Mozambique, and all over the continent in Belgium and across. So thanks everybody for joining us on today's session. Now, we're going to start off with Felene. You must be tired of hearing my voice. So Felene, it's exciting to have you. But listen, as I shared with you, I really want you to start off this with one of your very lovely poems. Recite as a poem, and then afterwards, we get into our conversation.
All right. Greetings once again. Felene Cayetano here. And I'm going to share a poem, which is in my recent poetry collection, Urua. The poem is called It Takes. It takes tears, hours of research, Coal Seeds, also known as Goosebumps. Time Alone, Roots Music, connecting with faces and voices of all those ancestors who died without their rituals, who died without acknowledgement of culpability by those who crushed them like ants, then stole the lands their ancestors left for them. It takes space to ugly cry, enough sleep, sometimes no sleep, hugs, forehead and ear kisses to ground me by the boys who call me their word for mother. Reliable friends who know there's a time for everything, and this is creation's time. This is creation's method, but longer. That poem was written at 6:54 a.m., June 27, 2020. My note for that poem says, last night, a dear friend asked me my method for writing a screenplay in 3 weeks. After 3 hours of writing on day 1, this poem emerged. Thank you.
Wow. I love it. I love it. Now, I need you to tell me a little bit more about the background. Of course, you told me why, but you talk about this, the sweat, the goosebumps, and the sacrifices. What inspired this poem?
All right, so let me get into it. It's going to get deep. We're getting deep quickly, Sammy.
Yes, yes, yes.
All
And I
right.
need us to get deep.
So as Sammy mentioned, I'm a librarian. I've been a librarian for 17 years now. I'm a Garifuna woman. I will type that in the chat. My ethnicity is a big part of my identity. We are people who were fighting against slavery and colonization during the time of enslavement in the country of St. Vincent. We fought the British, we lost, they sent us on ships, and we made it to Central America, where we are what we call a nation across borders. Garifuna people are in Honduras, Guatemala, Belize, of course, of the US, St. Vincent, where we came from. And I hope I mentioned Nicaragua, but in Nicaragua, there has been, like in St. Vincent, a lot of need for cultural retrieval. Now, this poem came because of an opportunity I received early on to become a filmmaker. I looked into filmmaking in 2019, 2020. And in 2020, an opportunity came to submit one of my screenplays, and the screenplay I decided on was something that has come through me for years. For years, I've been obsessed with the year 1937. It came about because there was a Garifuna village. This Garifuna village, known as San Juan, is where some, let's say, anti-government folks were agitating the government at that time in Honduras. The government sent their military and police to massacre people in that village. And what I came to find out that 1937 was a very turbulent year. So over the past 20 years, 25 years now, really, 1937 has stood out. And what I decided to do was create a screenplay about 1937. And as I was doing the research, it was very emotional for me to read about all these atrocities. It was my process when it came to this, because it is basically fiction, but based on facts. So I had to do some real deep research into the facts of different countries. There were about 7 or 8 countries that I was looking into where things happen, be they political or social. It goes on and on. And so I had to look at that research, embody the research and some of the people who likely lived, which is why in the poem, I spoke about those ancestors whose stories were never told. You know, we recently I've been reading about epistemic freedom. I've been reading about centering the South, centering the global South, centering ourselves and our stories. And that is exactly what I was doing in that piece, 1937. And the friend, once a month, I speak with this friend we are friends from high school. And so she was saying, what does it take? And I said, well, I'm about to find out. I've not written a screenplay this long in this short of time. So I'm about to find out. And on day one, I got to find out while doing the work, how emotional it was for me, which I didn't really anticipate. I didn't really anticipate it to that degree. While I was doing the research and hearing accounts of what happened, for example, in Haiti in 1937, in Ethiopia in 1937, these are some of the places, Barbados, those atrocities, really, really got to me during the research, but I was at work at the library. And I don't know about you all, but when I'm at work, I have a game face, right? So I'm not going to be emotionally vulnerable at work. But while reconnecting with that information, with the source material, and processing it in a way to say, let me share this specific story, or let me create a story that parallels what someone gave an account about, that's when all of these emotions and everything else came out. And so I wrote the poem.
That this is indeed deep and very interesting and exciting to hear. Nana Nyarko, allow me to go off script a little because I would have come to you after about 2-3 questions. But I know Nana, I know you quite well as a writer and as a poet as well. She was talking about very deep emotions in relation to the information she had. I have known you also as somebody who can be emotionally connected to your words, especially when you are writing deep from within, to the point where it can stir you in ways that I don't even mention, even sometimes dropping tears. What is the place of emotions in storytelling? How does it get people so, shall I say, worked up sometimes, and almost sometimes takes you out of this world?
I'm trying to remember, and maybe somebody on here will remember the exact thing. Amatedu said, people, not places. But something about memory, like people remember how you make them feel, and not if someone.
So it says that people always remember, people will forget what you say, but they will never forget how you make them feel.
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, I think that storytelling is, and most of our creative output is driven by passion, right? And if you don't feel anything, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a positive emotion, it could be anger, right? But I feel like you need to feel something in order to create art that is meaningful, that lives beyond your own experience. Like, because what are other people going to connect to if it's not some sort of feeling? Like, we can forget the details of things, but it's easy to return to a feeling. Like you can remember how you felt at 6 when something good or bad happened to you. It's so easy to return to a feeling, which is why it's important to try to tap into some emotional thread when you're telling a story.
Yeah, I'm just looking at, and I'm remembering when I was a young person in Ghana and some of the adverts on television that I watched even as young as 5, 7 years old. And I say, remember, I have vitamin A, I have vitamin A too, because they all came with certain emotions. And that is how storytelling is really, really powerful. So Felene, let me just come back to you and tell me your journey as a visual storyteller. How did you get here? And what do you do as a visual storyteller?
All right, so as I had said before, I got into film in 2019 or so. Prior to that, I'd say 2016, even, let's go way back in time. Let's go back to childhood. I was born in the 1970s and 1980s growing up in Belize. You would not everybody had a camera, right? So for my childhood, I have about, I'm literally looking at these pictures. One when I was a baby, being held by my parents and my siblings. It was a professional shot. There was another one on the steps with my older brother. Literally, there are about 5 pictures of me between the age of 0 and 6. And then the others between 6 and 9, maybe about 5 again. And this is from relatives who were living in the US, came, took a picture, got it developed when they returned to the States, and then sent it back to my grandparents to put in their album, or, my parents. So I always was fascinated. I felt, and so my story, personal stories, I was at the age of 10, uprooted to live in the US. And I really, really wished I had pictures of my friends and family and, the whole landscape. Those things I could only keep in my memory. So I said, and as soon as I could, I obtained a camera to take pictures of everything, because I had this feeling, if anyone can relate to being uprooted for whatever reason, you want something to hold on to. You always feel life is uncertain. You don't know when you're going to be uprooted again. So I use words to hold on to it. I use, again, the camera when I was able to purchase one for myself, to hold on to things. And eventually, while I was in undergrad, I had the opportunity to create a film. It's a short documentary that was more like a means to an end. I wrote a paper about Garifuna history and Garifuna elder care. And I said, okay, you know what? A film would be a good way to portray what actually happens, have interviews, and, I thought it would be less work, to be quite honest, than to write 50 pages. I could just, record folks talking about their experience, how instead of, let's say, an elder care facility, we have our elders living independently as much as they can, have maybe somebody check on them, things like that, right? And so I parked film and continued to write poetry, short stories, and then, of course, photography. But in 2019, a friend was telling me, listen, we want to have Belizean filmmakers share their own stories. I don't know if you all experience this wherever you are, but Hollywood films and maybe not Hollywood films, but others have come to Belize and they use Belize as a backdrop. We are not the central characters. Our stories are not the ones projected. And so this cohort was an opportunity to center our stories. And at first I was, I'm quite, my schedule is quite full. So I rejected the opportunity, but the friend convinced me to pursue it. And I said, okay, well, let me see, I do have a story that would probably translate well on screen. I learned more about the craft and I was able to excel as a screenwriter. I got the opportunity again. I applied to the Commonwealth Foundation and they had a grant opportunity open to teach emerging filmmakers how to bring their work to screen. And that's what I did. It was quite an experience, quite an experience. But what it did for me, I just learned so much, and I just decided to pick a story that would show our traditional knowledge, feature our language, feature our way of life, and as well feature the ways in which we live that cannot be described on paper. As Nana said, storytelling is a feeling. Right? So the same when it comes to my visual work, what I'm drawn to visually as a photographer is more so landscapes, is more so nature. So here's Here's one of my works. I'm going to try and get out of the way. Right, this right here is a boat, right? A fisherman in the morning. And then here is a sunrise. I mean a sunset. Right. So this is a sunset.
Wow.
That I took. So that's what I'm drawn to when it comes to photography, nature, and people portraiture. But when it comes to film, I really feel like telling those stories that are not told. You know, what am I not hearing? But we as a people that we are experiencing, especially women, and perhaps because I am a woman, you know, but a while back. Okay, so I mentioned I was, you know, I moved with my parents to the States at 10. Prior to that, I was living with my grandparents. So I really have a healthy respect for elders and ancestors and certain traditions.
Yeah.
When I returned, when I returned to Belize as an adult.
Finish up on that, yeah.
Yeah, when I returned to Belize as an adult to live my life, this was 17 years ago. I was living with my grandfather and I recorded my grandfather. I have so many stories from him. Meanwhile, across town, my grandmother, a different, you know, this is my paternal grandmother. While I was living with my maternal grandfather, I did not capture her stories. So that is forever lost to me. You know, she would tell me certain things, but I was not as diligent in documenting it. And there's a part of me subconsciously where I feel like my telling more women's stories is kind of to say, Granny, you know, I'm sorry and I'm doing better, which is to make sure that our stories are told.
Excited. I will come to you to tell me a bit about the Garifuna woman, because I do know that you are very conscious about the story of the Garifuna woman. Who is the Garifuna woman? And you've, in a sense, told us why you have decided to project your people. But I picked some very interesting things that you said, which I find very profound, and you will hear this only from storytellers. I'm essentially not directly quoting you, but said that the world is passing us by each day, and you do not know when you'll be uprooted. And so you try to hold on to some of the things, and you use words to hold on to things, and you use cameras to hold on to things. I found that quite powerful. Every day, I have two lovely kids. You know, I look at them 6 months down the line, I'm like, this picture, you are way bigger than that. 6 months gone. And I ask myself, how many of that did I capture? Did I hold on to? Even for those of you who are corporate communicators, your company is evolving every day and it's passing you by every day. Do you use words? Do you use cameras? Do you use whatever actions to capture them? So I thought that was really, really important thing that you said. And he said, you don't know when you'll be uprooted. You know, you don't know a time will come. And so consciously telling the stories of your people. And I tell you what, recently, and Nana Nyarko, I don't know whether I mentioned it to you, but I've been trying consciously also to collect Ghanaian proverbs that when I was growing up and I started schooling and I thought that those things were archaic, I feel like I missed so much and I'm trying very hard to be able to collect them. My grandmother died 2 years ago and I live with so much regret that I didn't take a recorder to go and record her and hear some of the great things that, you know, she had to do. You know, so that's quite a very interesting thing that you said. I should come back to you on that, and I will. But I think I would like to hear from Nana Nyarko as well, your own story. You are a creative, you know, writer. I know you are from one of the very traditional Ghanaian tribes, the Asante tribe, but not that aside. And by the way, tribal issue is becoming an issue these days in Ghana. That aside, you also have a cross mix of upbringing. You lived in the capital, Accra. You've experienced several other people. What has been your own journey and what has inspired your work as a creative writer?
But before you go on, I wanted to, I hope I'm mentioning your name right. Is it Felene? Felene?
Felene, yes.
Yes.
Yes, those photos were stunning. Thank you for sharing that. I don't know if I can point to one thing that inspired me to become a writer, but I can talk about different experiences that led me to accept that writing and storytelling is core to my purpose here on earth. As a little girl, I was fortunate enough to be exposed to story. My dad took us to the Osu library. He borrowed books from there. Every weekend we're reading a new story. And you know, as a kid, or I guess even as adults, when you watch a film or you read a book, that's whoever is close to you, your partner, your kid, there's this, you want to share the story. Oh, I read this book. And so I think that's how I started telling stories, just recounting the stories I read as a child, maybe telling to my sister or my little brother. And so those were the beginnings that I was exposed to storytelling. And I saw my dad read. We had bookshelves at home. So I was very fortunate to get that in my my early ages. And when I was a teenager in secondary school, at Tema Secondary School, my dad went to Nigeria and he came back. For the sweet dad that he is, he came back with a gift, and it was a collection of poems. I think it was Poems of Black Africa, and it was edited by Willie Soyinka. That's how I fell in love with poetry. That's how I started writing poetry. So the simplest answer to your question, Sammy, is that I started writing by reading. And even now, I had a friend get in touch with me a few months ago. She was like, he wants to write, but what should he do? And I was like, start reading a lot. You know,
Yeah.
forget who said it, but they said good writers are great readers. And it's true.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, and a bit about my background, like how does my background affect or shape my work? How does it not is the real question, you know? How does it not? It's our background and how we think, what we believe, how we experience the world really is influenced by our background. It's just it's our background colors all of that, and we bring all of ourselves. And if you want, I think if you want to do a good job telling a story that affects people emotionally or makes them think, that then we bring all of ourselves to that, right? And so and I think that that self-awareness of how your experiences shape your creative output is important, because it's only then that we can sort of have some critical distance from our own work and observe how others may perceive or experience life differently from us. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Then I was busy writing the very important point I picked, you know, one of the self-awareness and how it shapes your experiences. And I tell you a story, and I've said this time and again, over and over again. You would recall that years ago, I used to produce a lot of documentaries. Most of these were radio documentaries. A lot of them were history-based, etc., telling the African story. And one of the most profound interviews I have had, and it lives with me, is a Nigerian historian I interviewed, and he's called Chinwenzu, a very, very, he's believed to be controversial, but very deep guy. And I got on this interview with him about Pan-Africanism, and he went on and on espousing on how civilization started from Africa, how ancient Egypt was great. The world came to us. We didn't have to go to the world. He made several revelations, including the fact that even the Pythagoras theorem in mathematics, you know, Pythagoras wasn't from anywhere. He was actually from Egypt, and said a lot of things. So I asked him that with all of these, how come we are at the bottom of the ladder in 2011 at the time? And he said that it is because we refuse to write. You know, he didn't even say it is because we do not have atomic bombs or we did not invent. He said it is because we refuse to write. And he went on to say that what you don't write is not yours. And I thought that was very profound. It's lived with me forever. So the experiences that you go through as a person, if you let them fly you by, and to Felene's point, you don't take hold of them either by words or by the camera or by any other form, you lose it. And it's essentially one of the reasons why Africa, we've lost ourselves. But a lot of us are also losing the narratives of our companies. And I'm saying this because I know a lot of you are corporate communicators, because they fly by every day and you don't document what happens. You are in the extractive industry like I am in mining, and so many things are going on, things are happening. You don't capture the very relevant things. Somebody else will write it for you. So Nana Nyarko, that is, I thought, very, very profound and very interesting. Now, Felene, I'll come back to you, but I just want us to go straight into this this thing called AI that has come. I actually going to ask both of you this question, because we have said that stories is all about emotions and it's got to connect us. There she is. See who I see. Porsche Mysticque Steel. Hey, welcome. Please spotlight her as well. And Nana Nyarko and Felene and my colleagues, you would kindly allow me to bring in Porsche now, because she had a little emergency just before we started, and she still said she will make it. So I told her as soon as she comes, I'll let her on, so that, you know, if she had to leave because of that emergency, we'll allow her to leave. So Porsche, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sammy. I do apologize for joining late, but I appreciate you guys so much.
Most welcome. Now, listen, I'm excited to have you. We've had some very wonderful conversations with our two superwomen, Felene and Nana Nyarko, and it's going so well so far. But I wanted to take your introductory remarks. Basically, I mean, I've introduced you already to the people. You are a book coach. You train CEOs, you coach them to write books. You speak on platforms, you inspire, you bring up people. So you tell stories in different forms and in different ways. The question I have for you is that what inspired your journey to become an author, to become a publisher, and a storyteller, you know, by extension?
Yeah, it was an interesting situation. So I grew up in a very contentious household. You know, my father oppressed our household. So my only form of escape was through reading books. And in that, I had this natural ability to edit them, right? So it was really easy for me to pick out all of the errors. And so I realized that I could actually make a living off of this. And that's what I did. I became a freelance editor. And it was just interesting to read books about the world that I was being kept from. So me and my siblings, we weren't allowed outside, weren't allowed to socialize, weren't really allowed to date or anything. So reading these books allowed me to learn about the world that I knew nothing about. Fast forward, I met my husband. He's Nigerian. He's Igbo, my Igbo man. And so I moved to Nigeria and I lived in Enugu for 4 years. I'm back in the States right now. But while I was there, I really got into my African roots, right? Understanding who I am as a woman and who I am meant to be as a wife to my husband. And in that, he did all he could to lift me up and to help me heal from the trauma that I experienced at home. And I realized that there was this story that was a part of me, the story of where I came from, the story of the oppression that I experienced and how I moved from California to Nigeria on a whim to see a guy that I had only dated online, right? All of that was a huge part of my story. So I grew my freelancing business as an editor and I turned it into my company, Mysticque Publishing. And now I'm focused on capturing stories from other triumphant inspirational individuals, specifically CEOs and business owners, those people who had a long journey to get to where they are, and being able to take that journey and the wisdom that they garnered from that journey and combine them in books to create highly impactful products that can be used to educate the world.
Wow. Porsche, this is exciting and interesting at the same time. I mean, you and I know quite a bit about your story as well. And so this makes a lot of meaning and sense to me. But there's one thing that is common to what all of you say. Maya Angelou said that I write because I read. And to Nana Nyarko's earlier point, if you want to be a storyteller, then you've got to be a reader. You've got to love it. You know, I'm wondering whether I should just lock up my little daughter in the house. She shouldn't go anywhere so that she can read and become a star. But that's just that's just on the lighter side. But Portia, so you know, you just transformed. I don't know the bit about the natural ability to become an editor. How does that happen? I thought that yes, you love how to read. You continue reading. Naturally, you begin telling stories. Then you will learn how to edit. How is there a natural ability for one to edit stuff?
I think growing up as a reader, and excuse the background noise, but growing up as a reader, you know, my ability to consume the English language and to be able to point out when something isn't right. Yeah. It's just something that I did as a child. I was really great at language arts. I was really great at English and grammar mechanics when I was younger. So it was just something that I was good at, always good at as a child. But then as I older, I started working with mentors and coaches and educating myself on grammar mechanics, developmental editing, copy and line editing, and things like that. I had a mentor. She taught me everything that I know, and then just kind of grew from there.
Wow. And so, in your experience as a book coach, how can writers integrate the art of storytelling? Because not every writing is a story, is that correct? How can, because we agree that storytelling is the best form of communication. For me, that's what I think. Jerome Bruner said, if facts and figures are presented in the form of a story, we are 20 times more likely to remember them. So how can they incorporate storytelling into their works as writers? And I'm just trying to push as many questions to you so that if, for the reason that you and I know you have to leave us, I would have gotten as much from you as possible. So Nana and Felene, kindly indulge me on this. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies, for giving Sammy the time for us to do this. But yeah, I think it's important for people to remember the very simple equation that is always true for books. Story plus wisdom equals impact. In order to generate impact from the people that you hope to serve, you have to combine story around your wisdom. So, for example, if people want to publish a book with just information, you generate a textbook. If you want to publish a book that only has story, then you have a fiction book. But if you want a book that is meant to transform the lives of your readers, you do need to combine story plus wisdom. We as human beings, our lives are made up of many different stories, not just one. Our lives aren't just one long story, it's many different ones. Well, you can pick out a story and then discover the wisdom that you've garnered because of the thing that you've gone through. Combine those two things, and then you'll be able to generate impact for your readers, right? So I would say focus on that moment, right? What was that one gem that you got for yourself in your life? Then you take that gem, you write the memories around that gem, right? Like there's this major thing that I learned. Here's all the things that happened because of it. And then here are the pieces of wisdom that I have to share with you to make sure that you get the same or even a better result that I got.
Brilliant. So listen, you came down to Africa, you came to Nigeria, where you met your able man. And since we met on Landmark Forum a few years ago, you and I always look at the joy with which we speak about your Igbo man. Nigeria in West Africa is the powerhouse of literature. It's actually the powerhouse of storytelling. From Wole Soyinka to Chinua Achebe to, I mean, name them. Nigeria has got it all. To what extent did your stay in Nigeria influence your storytelling prowess? And what is it that we are missing? Nigeria is just next door here in Ghana. Let me know so that I can hop onto the next flight and jump into Nigeria.
No, it's interesting because I think Nigeria shaped who I am as a woman, right? In America, our we don't really have the same traditions or the same expectations for us as human beings or even us as women. When I got to Nigeria, the expectation on what it's like to be a powerful human was different, right? I was blessed enough to have an equal husband who had more modern thoughts, So like the idea of submission in a marriage in America, it's just like, we hate it. Women want to fight against the idea of submission. But my husband was like, to be submissive is to have all of the power because you get to choose to submit it. It's the whole thing, right? So being able to break down some of the limiting beliefs that I got from simply being an American woman, a Black American, where, this country strives to break us down. And then I go to a country where not only are those limiting beliefs removed, but they are then built up into these powerful platforms of who I get to be and the type of relationship that I get to create. So it was in that allowed me to have the confidence in myself to grow and move forward, and of course to learn. I wasn't afraid to learn anymore. So I could consume all this information and produce an equal amount of information at the same time. And so I realized that when you read books or even consume any creative material by a Nigerian artist in any way, whether they're authors or musicians or clothing designers, they have this innate desire to win and to excel. And there is nothing in their culture that breaks that down and says you can't.
Yeah. Nigerians are very special people. They have a very intimidating level of confidence. And but thanks for sharing with that. I'm going to ask you one last question, and while you are with us, and then I will now go on to Felene. So if we still have you after this question, that would be awesome. But if we don't, I would really, really want you to know that we really love the opportunity we've had to have you, despite what you and I know could have prevented you from coming. So listen, you and I have spoken about authoring a book before, and there are several things that I know you are up to. Supporting Fortune 500 and other CEOs to publish. How is it like? And if I'm as a comms executive, if I am to help my CEO to write, how does somebody like you coming, and how do you even suggest that I coach or support them to bring them to that level where they will consider to author a book? And in any case, must every CEO write a book?
Well, I would argue that every powerful CEO that we know globally is also a published author. Like just think about it. The people who run the major corporations also have books. And there's a reason for that. It is all rooted in their legacy and their desire to spread their thought leadership. A thought leader is somebody who has an innovative way of thinking, doing, or being. So if the CEO that you want to help has an innovative way of thinking, doing, or being, they can put it in a book and then use that book to expand their business. Not to mention that a book is a huge revenue generator, which is why so many CEOs use it as part of their branding and in their business. There are 13 ways to monetize a book. I myself made $30,000 in 30 days off of my one book because of all the ways to monetize. So if you want to help a CEO rise to the level of authorship, the first thing you want to ask them is, what problem does the world have that CEO can solve? Because that's where their thought leadership is going to lie. The world's most impactful books are simply solutions to the problems that people have. So if your CEO can solve a problem, then they should be able to write a book. The issue that you're going to run across is their schedule. So working with CEOs is really hard because they're always busy. They're always on the run. They're always jet setting somewhere in the world. They're all over the place all the time. So it's hard to get them to sit down and actually work on the book. So looking at their schedule and building out a working schedule that works for them is really important. So if they're solving a problem and they can fit it into their schedule with your help, then they can become an author.
$30,000 in one day. I'm quitting my job. Hey, Porsche, thanks a lot, and we're still going to have you on until it's time for you to leave us. But Felene, I was coming to you before, and thanks. This whole thing about AI, everybody is going on and on with AI, and you are a visual storyteller. You needed to grab the part of the world that you find very relevant with words, with cameras. Does it have any place in storytelling, especially considering the fact that storytelling is an emotional thing?
I think so. There will always be a faster way to get wherever you want to go. Faster does not mean better, right? My experience with I was playing around with it, generative AI visually to say, like, let's say a Garifuna librarian, right? And then a Maya librarian, some of the ethnic groups here in Belize. Of course, these did not come up looking much like our people, you know? I had to tell it more, give the prompt some more, and improve on my prompting. That aside, I too have a background as an editor, and one of my clients decided to jump on this AI write a book bandwagon. And what they did, and I will kind of be vague, but as specific as possible, the person wrote about being a vegan. And if you know vegan, basically no animal products, no dairy products. And yet they're writing a health book about their vegan health. Yet they got from AI here, there, and everywhere different pieces of information. And inside the book, of course, what did AI put in there? The AI put in there that meat is the best way to get protein, right? So like, again, I said, this is faster, but not necessarily more accurate and not necessarily true to what the person's ideology was. And of course, the same thing I'm talking about earlier, I kind of hinted at it, is epistemic freedom, you know, epistemic justice, the who owns knowledge? What knowledge are we being packaged? I will forever say that there is no universal human. You know, when I say he, I mean, even again, when you talk about that, it's always he, him, right? Now people are starting to say she, her, and now it's they, them. But there is no package that you would receive. But because of the people who make the software are usually Europeans or European descendant, that's what would come up when you look at AI, their knowledge, their ways of living and being and doing. So really and truly, we have to balance that and manage that and say, okay, what is our story? What is our sauce? Anyone can reach the finish line quickly, but are you doing so with integrity? Are you being true to the message that you want to bring? So for example, some people cannot write a poem. They want to put a poem together, let's say for a special occasion, for family or friends. They could run that through AI and come up with something. That's fine. When I wrote my third poetry collection, I have a designer that I've used for a long time, a collage artist. The process of going back and forth with her, with that collage, that process itself is what I was seeking for. That's what I paid for, that exchange. Yes, I could have done it with AI. Yes, I could have done it myself. Quite frankly, I do have graphic design in my background. But no, it was not about that. So how much do we value human interaction and human exchange and knowledge? It's really a personal thing. I hope, because, you know, again, people have been, as a librarian, I've been hearing a long time, are people still going to libraries? Are people still reading? Is it still important? You know, these things do come up. It has not ended libraries. It has not ended reading. It has not ended the pursuit of knowledge, the fact that we now have audiobooks and ebooks and we now have podcasts, right? In fact, there are podcasts and audiobooks and all that about reading, about these books. So AI right now, I don't see it as a threat, but I do see it as something to keep our eyes on based on who is asking. Do they want this? Does your client want something today that is beyond your capacity for whatever reason? Okay, you can use AI's help to speed up your process. If you're someone like me, my creative process tends to come more from inspiration than from
Yeah.
So it's not a here client comes to me and I will all of a sudden have a poem for them tomorrow. No, we have to talk. We need to engage. And then I can maybe write a poem that is in their voice or in the way they want it to come out. So that.
Thanks, Felene, because Nana Nyarko, I thank you for the key points you've raised. AI is here, we can't wish it away. The thing is, Nana, you teach creative writing, and you are an author as well. We started off this conversation by looking at the role of emotions in storytelling. Machines don't have emotions. Why don't we leave that to the others, to use it for mathematics, to use it for project work, to use it for, and we, those who want to tell stories, just go about it the normal way. All right. She spoke about, inspiration. I got inspired by very deep-rooted, very old African music, 1930s recordings, 1940s African recordings. When I hear the guitar, the strings, something happens and I'm able to come up with some creative things. AI can't do this for me. Does it have a place at all in storytelling?
Well, AI is a tool, right? First of all, before I say what I want to say, I think human creativity shapes stories in a way that AI cannot. But because of exactly what you said, we have emotions, and humans are able to infuse a story with our own emotion, unique perspectives, cultural nuances, in a way that AI cannot. But AI is a tool, right? And we live in the time that we live in. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say that, no, don't play with it. Don't explore the possibilities that AI offers. I personally would not use AI to write a story, but it's a tool. It's like, AI could, for instance, I've heard people say that one of the things they love about AI is that it helps them create outlines, right? So for instance, if you're a writer who struggles with plotting your outline, I don't see why you shouldn't use AI to get ideas, right? What I think is dangerous is to rely entirely on AI to do your thinking for you, to do your feeling for you, because we know that AI cannot feel. So it might be able to create a coherent plot, but where the structure of your story is clear, but emotional depth will be missing, right? So it could offer somebody a starting point, where a writer might be able to describe the internal conflict of a character. AI will not be able to do that. And, we know how to draw from like small lived moments in life to create a story. AI is essentially just pulling from existing patterns in a database. So that's also the question of originality and what's authentic. There's no AI that is original or authentic. It's just pulling from what other people have already created. So you're not creating anything new or fresh when you use AI. So you need to be aware of that, right? So there isn't a unique perspective that AI can ever offer. A human writer draws from their unique experiences. And we have something that AI does not have: imagination.
Right. I love it.
And imagination has no bounds. So, we can trade that off for yeah, AI is going to generate it in 3 minutes. You don't know where your imagination will take you if you just allow yourself to enter that place. You don't know what you might dream up. So it is, if we're going to allow AI to limit us, so we miss out on, the power of the human imagination and the cultural nuances and the personal connection, what makes our stories ours, what makes it stand out. Because you can enter the same prompt I'm entering. We're going to get the same story. Do we own that story? I don't think so.
No.
The robot owns
So
it.
integrity issues there, yeah.
Well, yeah. So, Felene, I'm not intimidated by AI. I encourage people to use it if it helps them think about ideas, but you need to it doesn't cut short the writing process in any way. You need to spend time comparing what the machine is saying and what you feel, what you believe, where you want to take your story and make it yours.
You do lecture students. Would you want to share with us some experiences you've come in relation to how students use AI and the outcomes they have versus how it used to be? So
at the beginning of every semester, I say, okay, you cannot outsmart me because AI generated text is so easy to identify. You're not. So think about it this way. Maybe you work in a company, you're starting your own business, you want to be a consultant, whatever the situation is, and somebody is coming to you, is relying on you to tell their stories for them. And you think, oh, I'm just going to create it using AI. Maybe that's where they started. I mean, they could also generate a product very similar to what you generated. And I feel like your integrity will be lost because they're not coming to you for something that everybody has access to AI now. So my students, I mean, they want to use, I mean, I haven't had this problem in creative writing. It's mostly, but also, I mean, I have been, I edit a literary magazine, and you see it immediately when you get a submission that was not written by a person, right? But in class, I tell my students that I'm not, I feel like it never works when you tell people don't do something, they will want to do it. And so I'm like,
yeah.
And Porsche was talking about wisdom, right? So use AI, but use it wisely. Think of it this way. AI is helping you meet your goal. AI is not doing your job for you. So you need to understand what your really is and how you can use AI to enhance that. If you think AI is just going to take over and do the thing, write a story for you and then you get paid, you're kidding yourself. Everybody can do that.
Well, Nana Nyarko, thank you very much. So, colleagues, you've been listening to Nana Nyarko Boateng, a writer and editor, Felene Cayetano, a writer, a librarian, a mother, Porsche Mysticque, a book coach. Now, Mysticque Steel, a book coach. Now, listen, I'm going to allow all of us to come in with our ideas and opinions because it's a hangout and we need to hear from a lot of you. I have tons of questions to ask my guests, but I need to hear from you. Porsche, if you have not left yet, right? If you have not left yet, because you work with a lot of corporate issues and in authoring books as an author, what have been your own experience, especially when dealing with clients and people that you are trying to coach? Do they now want a shortcut or they still want to go through, the full hog?
They do. A lot of people still want to use AI. And for me, it is a struggle because I have to do some rewiring for them and let them realize that AI is not the answer to everything. In truth, AI is meant to be a tool. It is not meant to write the whole book for you. The beautiful thing about that is in the independent publishing space, you have platforms like KDP, Ingram Spark, and Blur that have AI detectors. So if you uploaded a book that was totally written using AI, the system will flag it and take it down. So, I mean, us copywriters and editors, we are kind of losing our jobs because of AI. I have to be honest. But my job is to educate people on how to use AI as a tool in tandem with their own personal creativity. Because if they're only going to use AI, then the human element in their personal creativity is not in it. And then it's a useless book. right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
being able to educate them on that is crucial.
And a story without emotions is dead on arrival.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Felene, I need you to talk to us about the Garifuna woman. Again, with my personal experience with you, you are very passionate about the Garifuna woman. If you come to Ghana, the Asantes talk about one woman called Ya Asantewa, known to be a warrior. You know about Ya Asantewa, a warrior for whatever she did for them. What is it about the Garifuna woman that has led you to start a whole movement on telling the stories of the women in the Caribbean? Now, after this, people, you are allowed, the question is, what have been your own storytelling experience over this year? And do you have questions? Do you have comments that you want us to chew on in this hangout? Yeah, Felene.
Well, I go back to what I was stating earlier, my personal experience when it comes to my grandmother. We are not well documented. You know, we have not been the ones telling the stories. They were in the background or not even mentioned. I was engaging with some materials in the library from the late 1800s, and could go back and say, 25 or so years ago, I was with my grandfather, and my grandfather was telling me the family tree. So he gave me some names and I was writing them down. And one of them was of a grandfather of mine who was, I want to say, maybe the second alcalde of a small Garifuna village on the edge of Belize. And I was able to easily find my great grandfather because of knowing my family tree. But one of his wife, one of the other women of that time, when I looked in this is the government gazette from, I want to say maybe 1892 or something like that, 1890, between 1892, 1896. The women were ships. The women were there, maybe sprinkled every 50 or 100 pages, and they were in the context of inheriting land. That was it, right? But the men, of course, they have this government position, that government position. The lives of men, it was well documented, but not so of the women. That is, where I come from, is filling in that gap for myself, for other people, for the generations to come, because I am a Garifuna woman. My story, my legacy, what will come of it if there's not a tradition of documenting our stories, right? So it's all of that.
These things get me almost emotional. Because like I pointed out, what you don't write is not yours.
Yes.
And when Chinwenzu told me that Africa lost our place in the world because we refuse to write, not because we refuse to have atomic bombs, that also have had a profound impact on me for the rest of my entire life. Just about yesterday, I was just reading and listening to some old, stuff, and had to do with the Greeks and the power of the Greeks and the fact that the Greeks were thinkers, the Romans were warriors. And so as thinkers, they spent time to study the systems, they spent time to document, and they spent time to create narratives about themselves and about others. And so part of those narratives was the belief that some people, and we are as this, were naturally born to be leaders over others. And guess what? They describe those people as people with blonde eyes, with pointed nose, with light skin. And then at the same time, they said, those on the other side, you have a flat nose, thick lips, and etc. Like me, dark skin, were created by the gods, the Greek gods, to be subservient. And this was well documented and planted and pushed. So when eventually the Romans captured the Greeks, when they defeated the Greeks, because there was a lot of disintegration among the Greeks, so they were able to infiltrate and defeat the Greeks. The Romans, now they were wise enough not to destroy the libraries of the Greeks. So they took with them a lot of the Greek writings and the philosophies and the trainings and whatever it is, and the narratives. And, they began to study them and implement them. And so, you would agree that the Roman Empire is the only empire that conquered the whole world from Africa to England. And so while at it, they spread all these. So now you go to Europe and you realize that in Portugal, in France, in Germany, and every other place, they now are working with that Greek philosophy. And so if you are a Black man, the gods have created you to be subservient. Now, this was well documented and written, and it has been imbibed and bought, and people are living it. And so when somebody who has been trained that way is treating you that way, they are not intentionally disrespecting you. They are just trying to tell you who they know or think you are. And so that attempt by you, Felene, and to deliberately tell the story of the Garifuna woman and let the world know who you are will go a long way to also get people to know who you are and pass it on and get you the respect that you deserve. And these are some of the things we intend to do on ThinkStories, where Africans will begin to take that boldness and tell our stories, and let the world know what is right with Africa, because everybody knows what is wrong with Africa. So look, thanks a lot for for sharing that with us. Well, I do have a lot of people, and I needed to call some of the people who I know are very passionate about storytelling. And there is this good friend of mine called Dauda Odrago. He's from the Ivory Coast. Dauda, can you hear me? Hello, Dauda, can you hear me? Okay, if it can't hear me, because he has a couple of very good perspectives on this subject, and I wanted him to share. So Nada, if Dauda is not available, then I'll come to you. How then can writers adapt their narrative to resonate with diverse audiences? Because if I'm an African and I decide to put together an African narrative like what Felene is trying to do with the Garifuna woman, I'm writing it with an African lens. This is, I know, a bit more into it, but how do they position their storytelling in such a way that it will appeal to the diverse audiences and get their attention? So essentially, after you have been able to say, this is the African story, I've been able to put it together, how will somebody in Portugal say that, let me spare a moment and listen?
I think that, so this desire to appeal to diverse audiences has to coexist with staying true to your goal. And one question that I ask myself is, I think it's always at the back of my head. So and I'm hoping, I'm kind of asking not verbalizing it, but like, right? Do you see what I see? And my goal as a writer is I feel like writers need to focus on bridging this gap, building bridges between perspective and of the readers, right? Understanding their differences. And so, in a sense, especially in the context of a written text, each reader brings a unique perspective, different background, interpretation of the same text. So as a writer, you need to find a way to convey your message so that the essence of the story can be understood, felt, universal. So do you see what I see? Invites the reader to step into your worldview, even as process it through their own lenses.
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense. Another thing to consider is like language. The ability of language is vast, right? And so it's our tools as writers. We're playing with language, essentially, language and imagery. So the use of language, the use of metaphors and imagery should be carefully considered in a way that will resonate with your audience experiences. Choosing words, references that your audience can relate to, you help them see what you're seeing. Yeah, and by understanding your audience, you might be more likely to capture the cultural nuances that I was talking about, so that although it's coming from your perspective, you are not creating a barrier, but you shared understanding. Let's not forget that bottom line, we're all humans. Different cultures, we're also human. So there are ways to create relatable experiences on the basis that we're humans. So you want to make sure that the reader grasps your viewpoint, but you also want to be able to tap into universal emotions or
universal emotions. I like that.
Human experiences, right? That's essential because we're all human, right? And so you use those shared touch points in your stories to create moments where the reader can connect to the narrative on a personal because you're human. So you're bringing them closer with that question I talked about. Do you see what I see? Right? And then finally, Sammy, clarity. In order to make any story resonate across cultural or linguistic divides, clarity is important. You, the writer, ought to be clear in your own head exactly what story you want to tell, how you want to tell it, the effect you want it to have on the reader. If it's not clear in your head, it will be harder to translate that on paper. So a clear message ensures that your vision and the core, the essence of what you want the reader to see is conveyed and it's not lost in translation. So no matter what background is or what perspective they bring, if your message is clear enough, the essence of it will not be lost.
And I like the bit about clarity and also simplicity. Sometimes we tend to be overly all over the place just to show that we can understand English and we can write English. So thanks a lot for that. Nana Nyarko, you train writers, and I know that at the Get Center, you train writers, you have corporate clients and all that. Kofi Mensah is employed tomorrow as a communications officer for a big multinational, and his job is to tell the stories of that company, let the world know what the company does. But we are saying that the best way everybody can remember what he says is through storytelling. How would you advise him to position himself to be able to tell those corporate stories that will resonate with the people? And Felene is back. Please spotlight her again, because I'm going to ask her same question, but in relation to visuals.
I talked about being aware, having the self-awareness of how our background and our biases influence the way we see the world, and how that also allows us to maybe observe how people might experience life differently. So if you're telling a story, the best gift you can give to yourself is to stay true. I think that it's important to determine the kind of story you want to tell and how you want to tell it. So you're essentially, okay, I like to exemplify things. I feel like it makes it easier for me to, so I think the effectiveness of telling a story or the technique you use depends on the story type, right? So in a corporate setting, for me writing an answer, right? And so the story type and the goal determines the technique you use. So let's say the goal is to make your audience feel a particular emotion deeply.
Yeah.
Or you want them to reflect on an idea. Right. So how do you go about that? Begin by determining what the story is meant to achieve. So making the reader feel, making them think, making them question something that exists or doesn't exist. You see what I mean? And then structure. I mean, the art of storytelling involves more than just the structure, but structure is an important part of it. Every story has 3 parts: the beginning, the middle, and the end. You, the writer, you, the storyteller, you have to choose when to start the story, at the end, or the middle, or the beginning. And you will realize, before I give an example, you will realize that adjusting the structure and the emphasis changes how readers experience the story and what they at the end of the story, right? So, hey, imagine that a plane crashes. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be dark, and everybody dies. I could tell the story in many different ways, but I'm going to tell it using the basic parts of a story. Say this is a version starting from the end. So I begin by telling you outrightly that no one survived the plane crash. You already know how the story ends. So why keep reading or why keep listening to me? Because now the focus isn't on what happens. It's on how it unfolds.
Right.
We're drawn to the lives of the passengers, their desperate attempt to survive, maybe their final thoughts and their hopes or regrets. Maybe I want you to think about your own mortality, right? If you are on the plane, what would be your experience in those final moments? Would you scream? Would you pray? Would you be silent? Who would you think about? So by starting at the end, encouraging you to reflect on the fragility of life, maybe. And so the story is a mediation on this meditation on the inevitability of death and what matters in those final moments, right? Say I started in the middle and the plane is shaking violently and the turbulence rattles and the passengers are screaming. Now, as a storyteller, the thing I want you to think about is, will they survive? Right? I want you to feel the anxiety of not knowing, right?
Yeah.
You don't know the outcome yet. And so you're more likely to be invested in the suspense. You're riding the emotional waves, the fear, and you don't know what's going to happen, hoping along with the characters as they play, right? And this version perhaps will push the reader to consider what you hold on to in moments of uncertainty, right? So that's it, revealing raw human instinct for survival, right? And what our hopes are and what we reflect on when we are under pressure. The final version, we're starting from the beginning. I take you back to the very start. A family heads to the airport, a man and his wife, let's say, and their little girl, she's 7, right? They narrowly avoid a car accident on their way, and they stop and they quarrel with the other driver, and they're arguing by the roadside. And the wife's like, "We're gonna we will miss our flight," and so they leave the quarrel behind. They're all safe. They get to the hospital. They're running, and the little girl slips on a wet floor at the airport, and she cuts her forehead. Now they have to send her to the clinic, and they do all of that, and for some reason, they make it and they're on the flight. But as you're reading the story, you are anxious because you're like, oh God, you're going to miss their flight. And that's the whole point. That is what you're anxious about, right? So they boarded the flight. It's takeoff time. You have no idea that these minor incidences and inconveniences could have saved them from their untimely death, right? So this version of the story helps you reflect on life's unexpected turns and near misses. Are the inconveniences we gamble or we grumble about, or we are they blessings in disguises, right? Averting us from maybe a worse fate. So by focusing on these small details, the writer, is asking you to rethink the significance of everyday events and to consider maybe the trivial moments of life and how they can dramatically shape our lives. Same story, told 3 different ways, 3 different effects.
Whoa. I saw Felene clapping, and I think I'll do the same. You just written a storybook for us, and I'm going to make $30,000 out of it. Nana is my sister, so I just take the money from her. But look, that is excellent. I want to bring up a very creative young man that I know. He's a brother. He's an advertiser, and some of the most creative art I've seen on Ghanaian TV and in Nigeria and elsewhere, he's been behind it. He runs a company called Bloom, and he's also a storyteller. His name is Obi Nachukwu. He's a Ghanaian Nigerian, a very lethal combination to be Ghanaian and Nigerian at the same time. But it's one of the young men that I so love and appreciate. Obi, if you're here, can you please unmute? And administrator, just pin him as well. So I see Obi to share some of his experiences with us. Obi, can you hear me? I think he's still muted. Oh yeah, there you go. So please pin Obi Nachukwu. Kindly pin him for me. And Obi, we can hear you. Grateful if you could turn on your camera as well. That's if you're in a good place to do that.
Sure, I will attempt to do that. Can I be seen? Hello.
Where's Obi for me? Who is pinning Obi for me? He's not pinned, so I'm not able to see him based on where I am. Yeah, I can see him. You're in a blue shirt in a nice room.
Thank you. Good evening. I must commend you for this. This is actually my first time attending, and I wish I had attended the previous ones, but hopefully I won't miss any of this. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation especially around AI, right? I'm a bit of a geek, so AI is a big point for me. I have a couple of thoughts, right? So before I start, I'd just like to say that Felene, I'm not sure whether those were paintings or those were photographs, but absolutely breathtaking. Absolutely breathtaking. If you have a portfolio, it would be good to share and we can take a look. I thoroughly enjoyed that. So I want to come back to this point that was being made by Nana around AI, right? I'll start there because I'm quite passionate about that. So my journey is quite weird because I grew up as a teacher's son, a literature teacher's son. So I read everything on the shelf, even before I understood it, right? Which was interesting because then as I grew older, I began to understand certain contexts and how they had changed, as I was coming into the understanding. So an example is Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, for example. Yeah. Right? I must have read that book at 6 or 7, right? And I read it again when I was about in my teens and actually studied it for school, right? And so somehow seeing the story evolve as my own perspectives evolved brought it to life in an even more magical way across my life. You know what I mean? So I go back and read those books. Another very good one is Amujoleto's Money Galore, right? It seems to be like a living testimony of what politics is. It's like we go through the years, but the system never changes. The personas never change. The characteristics never change. I think that's really important, right? In terms of when we're building these narratives, right? I used to be a writer. Now I do more advertising works. I'm more of a copywriter at the moment, right? And so my journey has really been around telling brand stories, okay? Helping brands connect with audiences. And so when Nana was talking about, telling universal stories, is so true, because that's how you end up producing an ad where everybody's nodding their heads or everybody's repeating their lines, right? And you see that a lot in American advertising, where if you go to the international award shows, you realize that it used to be that North America would dominate these awards, right? Because they told such interesting, quirky stories. But once Asia and Europe caught on to this thing around universal context, and so universal truths, you realize that they began to rise in the rankings and are equal competitors, right? And that's one of the things that I really wanted to do for Africa, to help us get to a place where we're also tapping into those universal contexts, right? And granted, it gets more and more difficult as we become more and more globalized, but that I think is so true to what the core of being a writer is, right? And bringing yourself into the narrative as well is a big part of that experience, which takes me to my little affair with AI, right? So because I grew up as a computer science engineer, I did computer science and I went into software engineering. So I like to tinker to understand how things work, right? And initially, when AI started to come up, especially with generative AI, there was a lot of panic around, oh my God, it's going to replace creatives and stuff like that, right? Is it going to dilute the body of work that we have, etc.? The answer is yes and no. So I'll just share my opinion on that, and then I'll let you ladies get back to it. But I think there are a couple of things to take note of, right? So I'll start with the simple stuff. The simple stuff is, will it replace creatives? Not the good ones, not the ones who have their hearts in their work. That's the truth, right? Because a body of work has to contain soul, and that soul is given by the originator of the body of work, right? So, Phil, you look at your experience, it's completely different from what Nana's experience is, completely different from my experience, completely different from Sami's experience. And I assume it's completely different in context from anybody else's experience, right? And so when we take into paper, we put a bit of ourselves into that equation, right? And so that's why you can have, what a John Grisham feels like, what a Chinua Achebe feels like, what a Elizabeth Sutherland feels like, what an Amara feels. You're not reading the same body of work. You can read a couple of plays, but it's never going to be the same thing, right? Because that soul goes in, right? And in advertising, for copywriters, a lot of the time we say, when an idea is killed, a bit of our soul dies with the idea, because it's like you put your entire effort into this thing, and some clients, it doesn't resonate with the client, so they let it go, So that's the first thing. Who will it replace? It will replace those who have been getting along without the heart and the soul of it, right? And so for me, that's a good thing, because I feel like the originality of the work, I'm almost tempted to say that I think that the reason why people aren't reading anymore or as much anymore is because they cannot find a certain sense of self. If you look at what the Pulitzer guys are writing, even if it's articles on war, crime, right? Even if it's I was looking at the literature laureates for the Nobel, and this sort of stuff they write. It's from so many different varied contexts, right? Because they put themselves into the work. That's why novels will take things like 3 to 4 years, because there are people are pouring half of themselves into the work. So AI won't replace those guys.
Yeah.
That's my candid opinion.
Right.
But if you think about AI as a tool, right, that helps you brainstorm, that helps you fish for context, develop your personas, right? Then it becomes something that's handy in your work. But AI does not do the work. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is very important because in the tech space, there's like a finality where we wonder what the end of AI look like. And this is generative AI. So everything we are writing, right? Everything that's being generated by ChatGPT or whatever, right? The general conclusion is that if we just start to produce AI generated documentation, so novels by AI, stories by AI, articles by AI, in a few years, don't forget that AI is training itself on itself. Right? So if you stop writing and I stop writing and Sammy, you stop writing, right? And we let AI, so, Sammy, you're doing a story on, maybe it's PR for your company, right? And you just have AI write it. And it's fine, it's good, it's passable. You no longer put yourself into the work.
Yeah.
Because as AI gets better and better, it actually becomes better and better, right? But you remove yourself from the work. So eventually, in a year's time, in 2 years' time, 5 years, we're going to have a body of work that AI is learning from, which is generated from AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see what I mean? And that is why it is really important to understand the distinction. Because in a couple of years, right now, what AI is doing is getting from everybody. It's getting from everything. All the knowledge that has been generated so far. If we stop contributing to that knowledge, eventually it will run out of knowledge and it will start feeding itself on itself. So that's the one core thing to take into consideration, right? And I think that as a tool, so I don't write stories as much as I used to anymore, but I started to play with some sort of post-apocalyptic dystopian future, right? So I've written 2 stories so far around the post-apocalyptic dystopian future where AI has taken over, right? And I've written those stories in conjunction with AI. So I've asked AI to build for me scenarios of what a dystopian future could look like with itself. And I use that to write pieces because when it feeds me information, I'm like, this is interesting. So I've turned, so I have 2 pieces that I've written. And people like to read them and go, this gave me chills. And I respond and say, how about if I tell you that AI Help is my co-author on this? It also wrote this piece, right? So I just wanted to address that AI. That's my own perspective around, what AI is about and why it's very important that, now more than ever, we bring the soul into our work even more. I think that's really crucial. AI can help you sharpen yourself. AI can make you a better writer. It can learn your tone. It can then help you produce, more and more. But if we are not careful, it will get to a point where those who aren't able to put their soul into their work will be replaced as creatives. Because creatives have always gotten away with the fact that we are unique.
Yeah.
But that's going to start thinning out because you're going to want to see actual original thinking, actual soul, actual spirit. Right? So that's really important. I just wanted to add that.
Obi, this is deep. And look, thanks very, very, very deep. I saw Nana Nyarko nodding a lot. And if I have tons of notes, if I want to start breaking it down, we will have a whole discussion on it. But you've opened my eyes to a lot of very, very important things, especially the fact that, it's very easy. I work in a very fast-paced environment, and you need to generate so much content in a short time for your CEO, for your stakeholders, for whoever. If AI can give me in an hour what I could have used 4 hours for, why not? But you've opened my eyes to the danger, because I take myself out and eventually AI becomes the master, and why would I be needed anymore? So I
Right.
think that's a very, very critical point you make there, Obi, and thanks a lot. And like I said, Obi he's not put me to it, but he's one of the creative guys in the advertising space, in Africa. He does work in Ghana and across with a company called Bloom. So those of you on this platform, look for Bloom.
Interactive.
Bloom Interactive, man, and you get Obi. So Obi, thanks a lot. I saw you nodding a lot, Felene, to what Obi was said. Nasiba wants to say something as well. So Nasiba, get ready. I'll put you on. But what do you have to say in response to what Obi has said?
I've been listening to Obi a lot, and I sort of resonate with him, as someone who is also an avid reader and quite very interested in like creative work. And then the part that he talked about how if AI, if we are not really careful, and people who put their souls in their work would be, I'm just like, that's so I feel like that's true. And the way AI, like we can't have AI generated novels. I think Nana also mentioned how, oh no, Sammy, you said that if your story, is devoid of emotions, it's really dead on arrival. And I think that's true. That it's very important that storytelling has like a sort of emotional connection to connect with us, the readers, and also sort of to connect with us, the readers, which is very important. And that's what makes us read a lot. Considering why people do not read a lot these days, I don't know if I totally agree with what Obina said, but I sort of agree to an extent to why people do not read so much these days. But also there's a problem of access, and I think that would get to a point where we have to address that, because how easily we access books back in the days when we're growing up. I mean, public libraries were working. I don't know how much public libraries are working nowadays. So there's also an issue of access, which sort of hampers people reading as much as we used to read too. So to an extent, I agree with Obin. I don't know if I fully agree. I don't fully agree, but yeah.
Thanks a lot for that. Felene, you are a librarian. Why do you still have a job in 2024 when people are supposed not to be reading?
Listen, I'm going to go give a history lesson from way back in the day. This is, I want to say, maybe in a Publishers Weekly. Publishers Weekly is a magazine, and I was working for a magazine that reviewed books and music, and they gave a timeline to state when the book would die based on, this fast pace of ebook adaptation, right?
Right.
It was around this time, more or less. But people are reading. I always say people are reading, you're reading text messages, you're reading Facebook, you're reading, social media, you're reading smaller articles. It's the human attention span that has also been reduced. It's myself, I love audiobooks. If it's not an audiobook, I have to now carve time. I now need to schedule, reading it. And, I have to put on my glasses, like there's a whole thing when it comes to reading at this age and stage of life. I would prefer the audiobook. That's just where I am. Now, like with music did not go out of style because the LP, changed to the EP, to the CD, to the, but what do we have? Not heights. The 8-track. right? It did
Yeah.
not, the cassette, no, music is still here. It's just the medium that has changed. And so the same thing, we have been consuming stories. Garifuna, we are, you know, we're an oral culture. So it's
Right.
the same thing that you say about proverbs and certain sayings and whatever all else, those things are, people have them we've embodied them, but they're not documented, and that's where we need to go. But the one thing that we can all say is that if it is written, we have things that date back millennia, so to speak, because it was written, whether it was carved on stone or on papyrus or whatever it was that people could put it on. If it is there on something, then we know that it can carry on to the future.
Awesome. Nana Nyarko, I know there's something that is popping out of your mouth. Please let it out.
No, I mean, I was just agreeing. I just the thing about people not like Africans don't like to read. I hear that a lot. Anytime I hear it, it irritates me to no end.
But
Because
isn't it true?
it's not. People are online all the time. What do you think they're doing? They're reading. So maybe the real question is, what are they reading and why are they
What are
reading?
they reading?
And why are they reading that and not maybe the other kinds of readings we want them to do? When I was sharing my story, I told you, no, especially for, I guess, parents, siblings, anybody who's listening, reading, nobody was born, like when you were born, you didn't love reading. It was taught. Reading
Yeah.
is something that ought to be taught. So if you at home, you don't create the environment where in some homes, reading is punishment. If you do something wrong, you can't play again, go and read. Like, how
Yeah.
would you grow and then enjoy reading? Why would you walk into a bookstore and buy a book if it was punishment as a kid, right?
Right.
So if you make storytelling a fun thing, a way for you to connect with your family, then when you are an adult, maybe somewhere alone, you pick up a book because it's something you enjoy. It allows your mind to expand that way. So I just wanted to make the point that reading ought to be taught, whether at home. I don't think that we can entirely outsource that to schools and teachers. It has. How many people have bookshelves in their homes right now? And we all come
Yeah.
up and complain, we don't like, nobody's reading, because we are not creating the environment for children. How many times has your child or your little brother seen you with a book wrapped up somewhere and you're in that world? They haven't seen it. They're not going to pick it up. It doesn't come
Yeah.
naturally. You're not born
Yeah.
with it. It ought to be taught and cultivated. So if you're not
Right.
doing, I don't feel like we get the right to complain that people don't read, because they are reading. What they see
Yeah.
is media influencers posting videos and writing stuff, and so they read that. If they see people reading books, they will also pick up a book maybe. The other thing I
Thank
want
you. Please go
to
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
talk a little bit about universality and universal storytelling. I wanted to make a point about specificity, because specificity is what enables universality in storytelling.
Right.
It might seem counterintuitive, but when a writer focuses on the precise details, whether it's sensory experiences or specific emotions or unique cultural context, it is what transforms abstract concepts into something more concrete and relatable. So
Right.
without specificity, universal themes remain too vague and detached. It will not evoke a strong emotional response. We all can relate to, we all know how it feels to be loved or to be afraid or homesick. All of these are universally understood, but it will only resonate if you ground it in a particular experience. So you are immersing the reader into specific details and moments about Kofi or Amma. And that is how it invites them to access their own emotions and experiences. So
Right.
you close the gap between individual experiences and universal experiences by being specific.
Wow. Nana Nyarko, Felene, and all the colleagues here, can you believe you've almost done 2 hours? And it feels to me like we've done just 30 minutes. It's one of the most exciting conversations I've had on storytelling. Trust me on this. And but we would have to be wrapping up soon. I have Jeffrey Nyabo who's asked to ask a question. So Jeff, if you can hear me, please take it over.
Hello, Sammy. Am I audible?
Hi, very much so.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been very insightful listening to all the words of wisdom from the panel. And I just have one question. For many of us, or for me, I'm quite new to the message of storytelling, the need for us to tell personal stories and all of that for the audience to love, for you to have a personal connection to the story. And I'm curious about how or the role of improvisation in storytelling. And I'm saying this because it looks, for instance, if I want to tell a story from my childhood, growing up, I didn't, up until me being an adult, I didn't really have the mindset or the need for me to tell a story. Now I'm listening to all of this wisdom and I'm like, oh, I think I should start journaling my life, or I should start telling my personal stories. But then again, there's a problem because I do not remember everything from my childhood or even everything from my life over the last 1 year or 2 years. Now, what role does improvisation play in such a situation that you want to tell a story, but you really cannot remember everything that you really want to talk about?
All right. So what I would say about that is that, all writing is rewriting. And if you have a story, my story will never change, that I grew up with my grandparents, and at the age of 9, 10, I moved to the US away from Belize to live with my parents. That will never change. What part I choose to focus on? Do I choose to focus on what my parents, why they were gone, how long they were gone? Do I choose to go back to my scared 10-year-old self, having to navigate the American landscape very different from my own? It is really up to you. It's up to, as well, Nana mentioned it, the audience. Your audience will say a lot about what it is that you project. If your audience is one that you feel, okay, I could be more vulnerable with when I tell this story this time, then you can share that aspect, whatever it is that you are comfortable in. Because what people hear what you're saying, but it's also, again, a feeling. They feel your anxiety, they feel your pain, they feel your hesitation around it. But whatever it is that flows best for you, you kind of practice, you have to practice. Okay, well, I can, in this part, stretch out this story a bit. You can see it with musicians, when musicians, they go to chorus, they can improvise for 2 minutes, or they can improvise for 20 minutes. I mean, come on. We were listening to Fela Kuti, right? So
Yep.
some of the greats before, at the very beginning, you have to know when and where. And if you practice, then you'll know, okay, I can take a diversion here. I could take up a diversion here. But at the end, I will still reach the point where I want to go. And it's been a pleasure, everyone. I must go. As Sammy mentioned, I have a meeting scheduled already. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Felene, and it's been a pleasure having you here. I'll catch you on the other side, but grateful that you spend your 2 hours this evening with us. Have a wonderful time. Take good care.
I appreciate that. My URL is right there,
Yes.
felene.com. Obina, those were photos, and somewhere on my website, there are links to photo galleries.
Okay, thank you so much.
All righty, take good care. We should be ending soon, Nana. Before Nana comes, I think you have I have a couple of comments. This is from Victoria. She says that this is it's been a great learning moment. Okay, thanks for that. Those of you sending me WhatsApp messages, perhaps you should have put it in here. So Nana, let's hear you.
So, I mean, I think that the question asks, it's an anxiety that all writers have. Like, you want to remember, you want to stay true and faithful to the account, but when you're telling a story, you don't need to remember everything. I don't think it's humanly possible to remember every little. You have too much happening in one day. If actually to remember everything that happened yesterday, you couldn't possibly remember every little detail. But so I think the thing you focus your energy on is to ask yourself what is the core of this narrative, right? Because storytelling is about conveying a message or evoking an emotion, or, it's not about recalling every single fact or event. So think about the heart of the story. What is the main point or feeling that you want to communicate? And if you focus on this, then you can create or craft a more meaningful story. And so once you focus on the heart of it, then you're now searching for relevant details, right? Specific moments or descriptions to make that story come alive, that heart come alive, and help your audience connect with the essence of the story you're trying to tell. So if you're trying to recall everything, you will find that you have excesses, you have things that do not connect to the heart of the story. And so you really should include that. You overwhelm the reader with too much details. And then later, I like to talk about flow and structure all the time because it's an important, anybody can tell a story. The thing that makes us storytellers is that we think about how we structure the story, right? So I talked about how it begins, develops, how it ends. And then in structuring it, you realize that you need to omit certain elements because they are not in service of the heart of the story. So to sum it up, storytelling is about you guiding your audience through an experience rather than recalling every single fact. So it's okay if you don't remember anything. Let go of any unnecessary details. If it's essential, it will come back to you.
Thank you so much, Nana. Nana, this question, I suspect you've answered it in a way, but it's from Abigail Bonzi. She says, thanks for the very interesting discussion. I want to ask a question in relation to storytelling. When you work on particular projects, stories really border around successes, impact, results of specific interventions. In what practical ways can we inculcate discussing the story of a people in this kind of storytelling?
So again, in my work at Get Center, when an organization comes to me, it's like, oh, we want you to write a success story. The first question I asked about who's the audience? Who is it for? Is it for funders? Are you going to you want people to give you more money to do what you're doing? If it's for funders, the way we write that success story is very different. Like, you want them to see how their money is changing lives. They're not throwing their money away. You want them to see, if it is to expand on the project, to invite more people to come, and you want the people to see themselves. So the audience is to, we're expanding on this project. So again, it always depends on the goal. Why are you telling the story? You need to figure that out. And that's gonna determine the techniques you use. So first, have it clear in your mind as the writer, the storyteller. What is the point of this? If you don't have an answer to this, don't write a story yet. Or you could have a rough draft, but you need to figure that out, right? And then everything you do, how you shape the story, how you assemble the parts, it's in service of that goal, right?
Thank you, Nana. And Get Center, again, Nana has input me to this. So sometimes, we commission journalists to write stories for us for publishing in the media. But if you have professional storytellers who can also help your organization to tell impactful stories, Get Center, I know they've worked for a lot of very big clients that I'm aware of, Nana Nyarko and her squad. You can always reach out to them, and they should be able to either coach you or either take on a contract and work for you. So thank you very much. Kezia will be my last person because I saw Kezia's hand up. And if you are still around, please unmute and speak. Kezia Agbenyega.
Yes,
You
hi,
can turn
I'm
on
still
your
here.
video if you're able to. Okay.
Oh, I'm trying to put my kids to bed, so
Okay,
the
okay,
lights
that's
are.
fine. Right.
I just wanted to chip in. Hi, Nana. Great presentation. I happened to work with Nana sometime in 2019, and it was quite a pleasurable experience. And yes, she's very good at what she does. This has been so enlightening. I honestly don't have a question, but It's been so enlightening. A friend shared it with me, and I was like, okay, let me join and see what this is all about. And I am particularly happy I joined. So I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you for putting together a great team of panelists. Everything everybody has shared here has been insightful. And as you said, you had a lot of notes. I have a lot of notes as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this has been great. Thank you.
Thank you, Kezia, and we are happy to have your feedback. Okay, so thank you so very much. Watch out for ThinkStories. A lot is coming up. We're actually going to have some coaching sessions here. Those ones will not be free. For those of you who want to be paired with coaches to coach you on how to be good storytellers and all that, they are coming up. Our podcast is coming up. So many things are coming up. So follow our socials, and we'll give you a lot that can enrich your communication as a practitioner and as a storyteller. So